Hi, everybody. This is Lisa Bodell. I'm the CEO of FutureThink, and I am so proud to be here today to talk to you about innovation, most specifically a presentation we've put together for you all today called Innovating When the Pressure is On, How to End the Status Quo and Start an Innovation Revolution. So it looks like everybody's able to see the screen and able also to hear me okay. So with that, I think I'm going to dive in. Here. Again, my name is Lisa Bodell, and I'm the CEO of FutureThink. We're an organization that is focused solely on innovation. And what we do is we give training and tools to organizations to help them better innovate on their own. We're very practical, very tactical, and frankly, we want to teach people that everyone can be innovative. They just need to know how. I'm calling you today here at my desk in New York City, so you're going to get a little bit of background noise with the sights, sounds, fire engines, and cab horns of New York City as I'm talking to you here from just right around the corner from Grand Central Station, for those of you that spend a lot of time in the city. If everybody's ready, I want to pose my first question to everyone here on the call. My first question. So, recently, it was very interesting. There was a poll that was sent out, a survey from PricewaterhouseCoopers, and they sent out this survey on innovation to all the top CEOs, about 1,000 around the world. And the question was this: they wanted to find out the percent of CEOs that believed innovation was the single most important factor to generating new value for their organization, or the single most important factor to reducing costs. Now, when they sent out the survey, what percent of CEOs do you think responded that innovation was indeed the single most important factor? Do me a favor now, think about that, and type into your questions box there for me what you think the answer is. What percent of those CEOs responded innovation is the single most important factor? Ooh, I've got a 75%, a 50%, a 43%, 35%, 90%, 8%. Who's my pessimist on this call? 15%, 95%. Now I've got the optimist here. Well, let me tell you what the answer is, because we're getting in a lot of good responses. The answer is 78%. So for those that typed in 75%, congratulations, you can go home, you win a prize. For the rest of you, it's just an interesting statistic. I think that what this shows is clearly innovation is something that's not just top of mind, but is believed to be something strategically important to an organization. It can cut costs, but importantly too, it drives new value. Now, let me show you another thing. By the way, these shout-outs and these, when you type into the questions box, you can't see the answers, so I'm going to be reading them out loud to you. The polls will be shared visually live with everybody, so I apologize for not stating that sooner. Now, this slide here, here's another poll that I thought was really interesting from IBM. They do a global study each year for the chief executive officers. Now, 2010-11 study I thought was absolutely fascinating. So for those of you here on the phone that read the study, kudos to you, you'll know some of this. But for most of you that missed it, typically what they ask these CEOs is, what is the top leadership quality that you think CEOs or other leaders in your company need to have to be successful in the future? Creativity, for the first time, was not only in the top 10, but was ranked #1 as the most important leadership quality going forward for the next 5 years. Now, who cares? Why is that important? Well, the reason why that's important is, well, a couple things. One, given the current economy, and especially the rate of change, creativity is no longer a skill, but it's a leadership style. It's a leadership style. In fact, in many MBA programs and executive education programs today, creativity as a leadership style is being taught as a class. And that's a fascinating and seismic shift in terms of how we view creativity and problem solving. Creative leaders are known to be as more prepared to innovate. They're open to it. They're in the mindset of potential and proactivity. They are better able to problem solve, take risks, and most importantly for everyone I'm sure on the phone here, they're able to keep up with the rate of change. So see here on this list, creativity on the right-hand side here where the pink and purple bars are, ranked #1, ahead of integrity, and even more surprising to me, global thinking. That's shocking. Now, it's interesting though. Why is creativity and having this innovative leadership style so difficult for so many of us? If it's so important, why aren't more people embracing it? Why aren't more organizations innovative? Well, I do an exercise with a lot of the groups that I teach. My organization, we teach in about 20 countries a year, all different levels of folks, mostly executives and leaders like yourselves. But we also teach to schools. I've taught children, I've taught folks at colleges, graduate level programs, and it's interesting how when I ask a single question and do a single exercise, how different the younger groups and the older groups are as people get into corporate America or global corporations. I ask them this, I put this slide up, or if I just have a whiteboard in front of me, I point to it and I ask people, what do you see? So I want to think to yourself right now, look on my screen, what do you see? Well, when I ask adults or when I ask executives in programs, here's what they say. I see a blank piece of paper. I see nothing. Right? The level of skepticism is so high. Now, what happens when I ask children? What happens when I ask people that, quite frankly, haven't entered the corporate world yet or had the creativity beaten out of them? Look at the difference in responses. I see a snowstorm. I see a cotton ball. I see an ice rink floor. I see the inside of a coconut. I see a whiteboard. An invisible dog. That was a third grader, by the way. I see a race car with no sponsors. I see white noise. I see starting over. I also had one from a college intern who said, I see my boss nowhere to be found when I'm asking for a raise, which I thought was particularly clever. My favorite one, though, came from a third grader again, and I'm always just surprised, as many of you are, when you ask children these questions. He answered something that was very significant. He said, I see potential. And what I really liked about that was you can just see the dramatic difference between how we start with our thinking and how it, I'll say, devolves sometimes over the course of our work life. The left-hand side as adults tends to be our professional skepticism. It's practical, it's literal, it's what is. The right-hand side, where we're still allowed more creative thinking, is about the mindset of potential, and that's where we need to be. So why aren't we reaching our potential? Isn't that really the question? Well, it's very interesting. My story of how I started my firm actually comes from an experience where I felt my potential was limited. I am actually a recovering ad agency person. And I say that because I was always the strategic person in a very creative environment. And I found I was very good at taking strategic concepts or creative concepts and turning them into businesses. And for that, clients always loved me. They could see that I could turn something that was a tagline or an ad idea and turn it into a business. But the creative teams back at my agency tended to dismiss that because they made it very clear, although I was friendly with all of them, that ideas weren't my job. That ideas weren't my job. And the thing that made me think about is, who said that only certain people within an organization had ideas that mattered? And number two, if that's the way we were thinking in all our corporate America belongings, how much potential were we missing? So I wanted to make sure that we're actually getting into the mindset of potential and being able to think differently and think positively when presented with new and change and things that are different. Now let me ask everybody a question here. And when you see this symbol on your screen, I want you to know that that's going to be a shout out. That's going to be where I ask you to actually type in again to your question box for a creative answer. Tell me, when and where, let me pose this question here, when and where do you do your best thinking? Can you type that into the questions box right now? When and where do you do your best thinking? And I'll give you a second and repeat back some of the answers here. I have a couple answers of the shower. That's very typical. Shower early in the morning, in the car while driving, before falling asleep, followed directly by when I wake up, when I'm moving, when I'm exercising, falling asleep again, when I'm driving, running on a trail, collaborating with others, when I procrastinate. That's a good one. I won't say who said that. Anonymity is important. It's interesting. What a lot of these things have in common, and I ask this question to people all around the world, is typically a lot of people do it when they're moving. when they're active, that's when and where they have their best thinking. It's when they're not at their desk. It's when they're not doing the things that they spend most of their day doing, which is in meetings and emails. So most people are actually solving problems best when they're moving, when they're going somewhere, when they're not thinking about the problem itself. It kind of comes to them in an epiphany. So what's very, very interesting about innovation is right now we have this kind of oxymoron or irony happening within organizations, right? Companies are actually telling people, we want you to be innovative, but they're spending most of their day in tasks that are low value, meetings, emails, reports, etc. We want you to give us big thinking, but don't miss your numbers. Don't miss your deadlines. So it's very hard for people to know when and how to innovate. In fact, the best analogy I can give right now of how organizations are treating a lot of the employees is they're constantly giving them a box of crayons but telling them to color within the lines. And this is a problem because when you're giving people the half empowerment to be innovative and you're telling them to come up with new ideas but then making them all of a sudden go within the box, you already know the kind of ideas or frankly kind of picture you're going to get. So how do we change this? What do? We know that people themselves have the power and the potential to want to be innovative. But one thing that happens is there's a natural resistance that happens when we all come together, which is ironic, right? The only thing more naturally resistant to change than a human being we found often is an organization. So individually we have this desire, but when we get together, suddenly constraints come in by our to-do lists, our risk aversion, or our perception around politics of those that we operate with. And we want to be able to break that cycle. Now, I wanted to put this cartoon up, which I found this week in Dilbert, and I thought it was hilarious. Here's the boss saying, what we need is an overarching strategy to stimulate innovation. Or, Dilbert says, we could just stop smothering the innovation we already have, and the boss, of course, says, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Exactly. Right? Individually, we know we want to innovate, but together, it can be a little hard to be stifling. Now, what are some of the things that are holding us back? I had a book that came out last month called Kill the Company. And the premise behind Kill the Company or Kill the Organization is this. I believe that with many organizations, in fact, I estimated it at, with some of the research we did, over 80%, organizations are their own worst enemy. And they're spending more time inside than outside. And as a result of this, we're actually killing our own company. We're creating this environment where we're putting more emphasis on complexity and process versus ideas and outward thinking. And Kill the Company and all these different killer exercises, many of which I'm going to share with you today, actually came from a really interesting training exercise I had happen a year ago. I was asked to go into an organization, a manufacturing organization, just outside of DC. And they said, innovation is one of our strategic pillars. Can you come in and help train us on innovation? And I said, sure. And in the morning, we started doing all these really forward-thinking exercises like what if, and picture the future, and thinking about the impossible. And it was very hard for people to engage. And it wasn't that they didn't want to create change. It's that, frankly, within the company, they no longer believed they could affect it. And I have to tell you, as a trainer and a facilitator, it was just very demotivating for me. I asked everybody to take a break. And after about 15 minutes, I realized, oh my God, I have to change this entire agenda for the day. What am I going to do? And I decided that what was happening is people didn't want to take on more. We had to first clear the space to be able to get rid of what wasn't working first. And I brought everybody back into the room and I said, listen, well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to break into groups, and I want you to imagine that you are your main competition or your main barrier that's holding you back. And I want you to pretend right now, I want you to come up with all the things you're going to do to put yourself out of business. I want you to kill your own company. And I have to tell you, it was like lighting the room on fire. Finally, these executives were engaged. They said, oh my gosh, that's a great idea. I can have this out-of-company experience. I can actually come on up with ideas that can actually put myself out of business versus trying to constantly defend what I already have. And it was very powerful. And then we started killing rules and killing processes and asking killer questions, and a whole new way to approach innovation was born. And what it did is it got rid of two things that I think are really plaguing us today. The first is the complexity I mentioned, and the second is the complacency. Right? With complexity, people kind of go, oh, God, I just have more to do. And the result from that is